is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the NHL Strategy Show on Stochastic. I need to fix that. I will start doing that better. But I am your host, Josh Harris. Fun little three-gamer last night. The Rangers suck, but that is things we knew for 1,000, Trebek. Also, the Blackhawks looked as expected. Like, they didn't look good. But they have bright spots with Nazar, Bedard, Rinzel, Spencer Knight. You know, they're going to have those games where they just move the needle. It wasn't last night. The defending champs missing their two guys didn't look like world beaters, but they did what they were supposed to and won their opening night. The late game, which was weird because I missed the game because I fell asleep because I'm old now. But if you look on Nat Stat Trick, I was looking this morning, the Kings actually won that game at 5-on-5 per the numbers, and they still got steamrolled. So, like, that's not good going forward for them. The Cody Ceci experiment was off to a raging start. But, yeah, lots of good nights for the subscribers. Cliffy has that written down because I have the memory of an ADHD squirrel. But joining me, as always, Slim Cliffy, how was your night?
Yeah, not bad. Depends what we're talking about. I'm in cash, which was, considering the Rangers fell on their face. The Chicago 2 carried me, Nazar Teravainen. So anytime you have one of your stacks do almost nothing, both my defensemen did almost nothing, and I still cashed, take it and run. Also watched the Blue Jays game last night, which was one of the most depressing sports events of my life. I just couldn't believe it. But yeah, we did have a lot of winners. First, I'm going to shout out Riley. He took down, it was a $5 single entry last night. I think there were two of them, and this was the second one. Both were the same size, though. I think both had over 900 contestants. Took down first place. He had the Key Brazeau one-off. Brazeau with 2 goals last night for Pittsburgh, but he had McKinnon, Lehkonen, Natchez, Makar, Wedgwood in net, had a very good game. That Florida third line that we talked about did just fine as well. So he took that down last night. Congrats to him. Also got a shout out Clayton. Clayton's been with us for years now. He took down the hip check last night. He also had McKinnon and Natchez and Lehkonen and Makar with the Brazeau one-off, but he went with Chicago 2 as opposed to Florida 3. Chicago 2 had a great night last night. He had Bertuzzi and Nazar, so congrats to Clayton for the takedown. Also have to shout out Elway's Army. Dave Oliver took down 2 separate quarter arcades last night. All over the leaderboard in the QA, took down first place in both of them. So he had a huge night. So a lot of very good nights for the subscribers last night. First night of the season. You really do love to see that. So glad we were able to get a few people some good nights. Wally Balls, he cleaned up in NHL last year. Didn't bink last night, but he told us he went a little over 3x playing high dollar stuff. So congrats to him as well. You and I both been cashed. And again, with the Rangers doing absolutely nothing, we take those. Overall, not a bad night. Hard to complain. Hopefully we can do something similar here tonight.
Yeah, Dave Shapiro. How about the New York Rangers? If you're a Rangers fan, I don't know if he's on Twitter anymore, but I know he's on Blue Sky. He has a Rangers blog. Really good stuff. I like to read it. I haven't looked at it today, but maybe he thinks Rempe should be sent to the moon and Brett Berard up and, move Sheary or someone off that third line down to the fourth line, maybe Radish. But anyway, I don't want to go too long on the Rangers. I will lose my mind. They had one high danger chance against the Penguins yesterday, which is atrocious. But let's move on. If you were tuning into the show yesterday and you're still on the fence about joining that $1 deal, today is the last day for it. If you use promo code PUCK, you get any NHL package for today. It will expire tomorrow. There we go. And then the other one that he had up, promo code CUP, that will get you 30% off any monthly package that fire Radish into the sun. Yeah, for sure. 30% off any monthly package that goes until that is valid through Tuesday night. So click that link in the chat, especially, if you're relatively new, want to give the tools a try, you can get the tools for tonight for $1. It will renew tomorrow. We have a nice 4-gamer here tonight. Pricing is Charmin soft. That is an understatement. We have some big boys on the slate. We have McKinnon. We have McDavid. We have Draisaitl. We have Matthews. We have Jack Eichel, the greatest winger of all time, Mitch Marner. But yeah, all the big – I love Mitch Marner. He's my favorite player. All the big totals are at home here tonight. This Boston, Calgary, and LA all have totals 2.5 or under on the road. LA is on back-to-back on the road. Normally, if you're like jamming in Edmonton 1, you probably can't fit in another guy with him, like a Matthews or Eichel or something like that. Pricing is so soft here tonight that I feel like depending on which stack you choose, you can also fit one of the other big guys in. So I'm not saying it's going to be a heavily duped night, because if you're not doing like a normal 3-3 build, it doesn't truly matter. In smaller fields, you do have to be at least a bit aware. In the bigger tournaments, there was a 5-way chop at the top last night, but I feel like we're going to see a lot of one-off Matthews, a lot of one-off McDavid, a lot of one-off Eichel here tonight. So just be aware of how you're building. But what are your initial thoughts on this slate?
My initial thoughts is at least it looks more interesting to watch than last night. I mean, maybe I'm a little bit biased as a Montreal fan, but again, like starting with the Chicago Blackhawks and then rolling into Penguins Rangers in the year 2025 is just really tough scenes. I do like these smaller slates. Like tomorrow we have a massive 14 gamer. Those are the nights that I just absolutely loathe. So like a 4-game, maybe it's a little bit small. Like I like 7, 8, like something like that. But 4 games I think is perfectly fine. One interesting thing for me about these games is power plays and penalty kills. We'll talk about them as we go through each game. But one thing that's very hard to project season to season is power play opportunities for a team over the course of the season, because they can vary pretty wildly from one year to the next. But Montreal, we'll talk about them. They're the first game up. They were the most penalized team in the NHL last year, gave up the most power plays. Vegas, we'll talk about them at the end of the slate, gave up the fewest power play opportunities to the opponents. So we saw last night the Kings get into some penalty trouble. Now they only gave up 1 power play goal against, but they gave up 6 power plays to Colorado. Obviously, that's not going to sustain itself. But if they are a heavily penalized team, they had a pretty bad penalty kill for the first, 2 to 3 months of the season last year before turning around in the second half. They could get into a lot of trouble very quickly. So I think power plays and penalty kills, they're always important on every slate. I think when you're looking at a slate that could feature the most penalized team in the league and the least penalized team in the league, that becomes even more important.
Yeah. And, we'll talk about it. Like Montreal, they have 2 units that are playable now, which is an issue. Toronto is going back to the traditional 4-forward, 1 defenseman unit. Edmonton is missing Hyman. So, yeah, let's get into these games, though, and let's break it down here. We got Cliffy's Montreal Canadiens with a 2.7 total. Heading into Toronto, the Leafs have a 3.3. No Marner for the Leafs here. I will say it seems like Matthews is seemingly healthy. He admitted last year, even before the 4 Nations break, he was hurt. He still put up a 91-point season. If that's his down year, then good God. He is starting the year with Matty Nyes and Matthias Maccelli, who we both really like. He is not Mitch Marner, though. Mitch Marner, the greatest winger of all time, is now next to a real American center, Jack Eichel, not some fraud who pretends to be a Freddie Mercury transplant. Now that I got that out of the way, Tavares, Nylander, McMahon, Domi, Robertson, Joshua, Montreal going Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Gallagher, Bolduc, Kirby Dach, and then Demidov, Newhook, Kapanen, Line A, Evans, Anderson. Josh Anderson got to get this win. And no, listen, for those who are new, I could not stand Mitch Marner on the Leafs. So now that he's away from Matthews, I just call him the best winger of all time. But here we go. Toronto 1 is 16,600 here tonight. It is cheaper than Toronto 2. It is cheaper than Montreal 1. That's going to be a problem. They're 22.3% top two stack, 25.7% projected ownership on a 4-game slate. That honestly isn't awful. You get Matthews and Nyes on the top power play unit. And as Cliffy alluded to right before we got into this, Montreal took some of the most penalties in the league last year. Now their penalty kill improved, but if you're going to take that volume of penalties, it's still going to be a massive issue. Morgan Riley comes back onto the power play now. So the power play one for Toronto is Matthews, Nyes, Nylander, Tavares, Riley. I think that top line is fine. And obviously they're in play in all formats here. The one thing I will say, and it's kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face, is like, we'll have to see what the middle six for Montreal looks like. Like Kirby Dach should be better than the centers that were there last year, but he's been out pretty much for over a year now. Bolduc is a young kid. Gallagher's an old chicken. You know what I mean? So like, I think their only decent defensive line as of right now, until someone proves me wrong, is Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Caulfield, and even them last year, they were giving up over 3 expected goals against per 60. So like, I think Toronto 1 is in play. But like, once you get past them, it gets a lot worse defensively. Now the Canadiens did revamp their blue line. Like they have Matheson, Dobson, Hudson Goulet, and then Carrier on the third line. That's a much improved blue line compared to David Savard not being able to skate. But like once you get past Nick Suzuki, the lines get worse defensively. I do really like Toronto too, because they are $1,000 more expensive and they're coming in with less ownership. Now, the only reason I like that is because pricing is so soft and like people are just going to gravitate towards 16-6 Matthews. Now, is Matthews' line the better play? Yes. But like from in my mind thinking like, oh, if I'm just going to jam in Edmonton 1, say, and then like one off Matthews, you're on a really chalky path. Now, the issue is it's like, do you really want to stack Toronto without Matthews? And I think the answer is no. And I'll kind of revert to what I said last year. If their power play is rolling, the two guys you really want in the Leaf stack are Matthews and Nylander. Whether you want to add in Tavares after that or add in Nyes after that, I think going to a Toronto power play stack is probably how I would attack the Leafs here tonight. You'll get some unique combos. And, you know, I'm a big Michelli guy. I kind of worry that he'll play like 14, 15 minutes. He isn't on the top unit. So I want as much exposure to the Leafs top power play as I can get until the Canadiens can prove that they aren't taking penalties. Now, the bottom 6 for Toronto, I don't have a ton of interest in. There's no real need for an $8,200 line. It's not like there's 26,700 Tampa Bay one on this slate. You know what I mean? So I don't really have interest in the bottom 6. The Montreal side is a little interesting, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because last year, the Toronto penalty kill sucked. And I don't see it improving a lot. Maybe Nick Roy helps it a little bit, but like that's just one guy, you know, he can't play all 2 minutes every penalty kill. The issue that I'm running into, instead of just being like, yep, stacking Montreal 1 and going is that they have it. They're probably going to run 4 lines. And when everyone is healthy, Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky may play only 17 minutes. And now they have 2 units on the power play where we might see like a Dallas Stars split. Like Demidov and Laine are on the second unit. So you're probably going to see a Dallas Star split type power play here. And Montreal 1's the most expensive line in this game at 18-3. They're coming in with 8% projected ownership, which is attractive. But it's not like they're guys out and Suzuki and Caulfield are going to play 18, 19 minutes. The plus side to Laine not being on the top power play is it will funnel through Cole Caulfield. So can they get there in their more limited time on the power play? Absolutely. But I do worry at that price, their minutes, their power play allocation, that it's not just the slam dunk that it was last year when they were playing 20, 21 minutes. The depth, like if you want a one-off Balduke, because he's on the top unit at 3,200, I think that's a lot more interesting play than a Justin Brazeau one-off last night, which was optimal, and I'm eating my words on that one. But Balduke 3,200, top power play, don't mind him. I don't know how much time that second unit's going to get. Like Laine on the fourth line may play only like 11 minutes, you know what I mean? So it's really the top line for Montreal, and I have concerns there. So it's more of an MME play, but Toronto power play is my favorite.
Yeah, I'll start on the Toronto side. We do have to talk about Mitch Marner not being there. That is obviously a huge deal. But what I want to point out is that it's a bigger deal for the Toronto power play than I think it is for them at even strength, at least as far as just offense is concerned. If you look over the last few years, in the minutes that Austin Matthews has played at 5-on-5 without either Mitch Marner or William Nylander on the line with them, 3.2 expected goals per 60, 4.1 actual goals per 60. Like, just as good, right? As him and Nyes I think are going to be just fine together. Matias Maccelli, here's the thing I'll say about him is when Arizona moved to Utah, not only did they move to a new city, they completely overhauled their offense. Like Utah, by far created the most off the rush in the league last year. And Matias Maccelli, when he's been at his best, he doesn't play off the rush that much. He's much better off the cycle. And the Toronto Maple Leafs generate a lot off the cycle. That's how Craig Berube coaches. That's how Austin Matthews and Matthew Nyes play. I think Maccelli's going to fit in fine. Like, he's not Mitch Marner. I'm not saying he's Mitch Marner, but I think he's going to have a good rebound season. And that line as it is, I think is underpriced. Number one, because I just think that, Maccelli's probably going to come up, maybe $500 or so. I think Matthew Nyes, when he's at his best, is going to be pushing $6K on DraftKings. He's 4,700 right now. Austin Matthews is 8,300. Like, there are going to be times this year that guy's going to break 10K. So, like, I think you can make a pretty good argument that line is underpriced by probably $2,500, $3,000. Like, it's a lot. So, when I look at my values for tonight, Toronto 1 is number 2 on the board for me. Like, and it feels bad because there's a little bit of negative leverage. They're going to be in about a quarter of lineups. But you mentioned how Montreal's middle six, like, I'm with you. Like, I'm not sure how good defensively they're going to be. Now, I think if Doc looks like the guy he was a couple years ago, him and Bolduc and Gallagher are going to make a pretty good line. Doc has to show that he's the guy that he was a couple years ago. He's just missed way too many games over the last 2 seasons. Until then, like, this is an Austin Matthews and Matthew Nyes line that I think is very reasonably priced. So I really do like Toronto 1 here. If you want to dip down to Toronto 2, I think that's fine. $1,000 more expensive, but quite a bit less ownership. Nylander, Tavares, and McMahon, they are a good line together. If you look at last year, 4.2 goals per 60 minutes. Now they're definitely overcooking a little bit by shooting percentage, but they also created 35 shots per 60 at 5-on-5, like a lot of shots. So I think that's fine. Here's the thing where I think Toronto was going to really miss Marner's on the power play. I honestly do think that. Like, I think the Toronto power play is still going to be good. I just don't think they're going to flirt with being a top 5 power play in the league. Like, they'll be in the top half of the league. I don't think they're going to be top 5. And if you look at Toronto's power play over the last few years without Marner, expected goals go down 30%, actual goals go down 39% when Marner's not on the top unit. The sample isn't big because he only missed like 16 or 17 games over 3 years. Like, he stayed pretty healthy. But, shot volume went down, expected goals went down, and the goals went down with it. So that worries me a little bit. But considering how cheap that top line is, I think it's hard to ignore. So I do like Toronto 1. I think Toronto 3 is fine if you need him as a filler. But like you said, basically, unless you're stacking the Leafs, you don't really need an $8,200 line. Max Domi's, whatever we think of him, he's still a good passer. Nicholas Robertson on a per minute basis is a pretty good shooter. I also wonder if that doesn't end up being the 4th line at times. You know what I mean? And they end up using what is listed right now as the 4th line, that Roy Yarncroc line as kind of like a pseudo checking line, and they outplay the 3rd line. But anyways, I don't mind them, but I do really like Toronto 1. On the Montreal side, like, it's the top line. But as you said, I do think there's concern for minutes. If you look at Suzuki added, I think it was like 1:40 per game after Kirby Dach got hurt last year. Before that, he was like around 20 minutes. After that, he was at like 21:45 to 22 minutes a game. There were times he was getting 25, 26 minutes a game. He's just not going to get that when this forward group is healthy. And they're built on efficiency, not volume. And, that works fine. But I don't know if he's going to be like a 90-point player if he's skating 19 to 20 minutes as opposed to 21 to 22 minutes. On the health front, one thing I'll mention as well, Juraj Slafkovsky had a strong finish in the after the 4 Nations Cup last year. What I will mention is I was watching a documentary on the Montreal Canadiens season last year. He had his shoulder in a sling before the season even started. So to me, he was playing through a shoulder injury until the 4 Nations, and then he got, 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks off or whatever, and then he was healthier down the stretch, and he had like 22 points in 26 games, 2.5 shots per game or something like that. I think that's closer to the guy that we're going to see. I really do like Montreal 1, but if I have a choice between the top lines here tonight, I think I'd rather go with Toronto. They have a higher points projection. They're cheaper. Yes, they have more ownership. I think if I was playing like 3 lines or 5 lines or something like that, I think Montreal 1 might sneak in. Montreal 1 might sneak in there. But for me, it's Toronto 1. I don't mind the Dach, Bolduc, Gallagher line. Gallagher's still a good volume shooter. I'm a big believer in Bolduc. He had over 20 goals last year. Whether or not Dach can bounce back or not, I don't know. But if they're all playing well, that is a line that is going to control the play against the bottom 6 from the Leafs. So I don't mind that line. But for me, this game's about Toronto 1 and maybe the Dach line for Montreal.
Yep. Before we move on, we have a $2 super chat from Poe DeGen. Said, for this sunscreen fund for the homie Clifford. You got the windows open?
Nice. I do. It's actually a little bit cloudy today. It was sunny yesterday. But, certainly appreciate the super chat. Appreciate the support all through the year. Hopefully we can help you out a little bit on tonight's slate and on the slates moving forward. But I appreciate it, man. Thanks.
For sure. Let's move on to the worst game of the season. That is a joke. It is the worst game tonight, hopefully. Boston Bruins with a 2.4 total. Heading into Washington, the Capitals have a 3.1. Washington going Ovechkin, Strome, Protas, Wilson, Dubois, McMichael, Leonard, Beauvillier, LaPerriere. Boston going Pasternak, Geeky, Lindholm, Zacha, Arvidsson, Casey Middlestat. Boy, oh boy. It's just like Boston doesn't really have a choice other than to play Elias Lindholm with David Pasternak. And they got off to one of the slowest starts ever for David Pasternak last season. Maybe they improved towards the end because I know they came back together, but they don't really have options here. They're fully correlated. Morgan Geeky did have a very good season last year. If he can come close to that, I actually don't mind that Boston top line. They are 18K, which is an issue because both Toronto lines are cheaper. Montreal one's $300 more. There's other lines that I just rather play. But if I'm making 20 lineups here tonight, 150 lineups here tonight, they're coming in under double-digit projected own with a 17% top two stack. And let's call a spade a spade. Outside of that 2-month stretch where Logan Thompson was literally saving everything, this team is not very good defensively. Strome Ovechkin, good offensively, not very good defensively. I will say for a fair stretch of the season that Dubois line was very, very good. But, they're not an elite defensive team. Pastrnak is unbelievably cheap for him at 8,100. Matthews' price is underpriced. McDavid's underpriced. Drives. Pastrnak for most of this season will be 8,800 to 9,500. So am I advocating for a full Boston one stack? If I'm making 20 lineups, yes, it's definitely in play for me because they are fully correlated. In 1 to 3 max, single entry to 3 max, I think I'm more likely just to go to a Pastrnak one-off or even a geeky one-off because he's not very expensive at 5,300. You know what I mean? So I don't really hate Boston one here, even though they have the lowest total on the board. But if you look at their lines and you expect them to beat their total, it's not going to be a shock to see where it comes from. You know what I mean? It's one of those top heavy low totals where if they score 3 goals here tonight, there's Pastrnak will be involved. I don't have a ton of interest in, the rest of Boston. I will say if you're power play stacking the Oilers and want to do a middle stat Arvidsson 2-man or something like that, fine. But I'm not running out to play the Bruins here. Now, on the Washington side, there's a couple things here, right? Hampus Lindholm is healthy. Jeremy Swayman had a full camp. Charlie McAvoy's healthy. Their blue line is much improved to last season. They're still not a great team, but it's their issues are more when they're fully healthy. Their issues are more where is the scoring going to come from after Pastrnak compared to holy shit, we're giving up 9 goals because we suck defensively. This is still a decent defensive team. So I don't particularly love the Caps in single entry here. I will say it's 17-1 and positive leverage. It would be Washington 1 for me. Strome, Ovechkin, those two have, Ovechkin's best numbers last season were with Strome. Protas shot 9,000%. I don't expect that to continue, but he had an unbelievable season. That line has been good all last season. So it would be Washington 1 for me. Washington 2 is $3,000 cheaper. You do get 2 of the 3 on the top power play, but they were for a lot of the season setting Dubois out against top comps. So I'd rather get Strome Ovechkin out against the middle 6 than PLD out against the Lindholm line. So it would be Washington 1 for me. I don't mind a McMichael one-off, a Tom Wilson one-off, something like that. But really it is both top lines here. It's not my favorite game here. The top stacks agree based on the ownership here, but it's 4 games. You don't really X anything out, especially if you're making multiple lineups.
Yeah. Here's the thing. If this was a 9-game slate, I would probably just put a giant red X right through the Washington Capitals.
Yeah.
Just to talk about the Caps briefly, last year they had the best 5-on-5 shooting percentage of any team in the analytics era. That's since 2007. So in 18 years, they had the best 5-on-5 shooting percentage team. Now, shooting percentages have been going up over the last few years. So there's another few teams in the top 10 since 2007. These are the teams. The 2022-2023 Seattle Kraken. And what have they done since? And then in 2023-24, you have both Vancouver and Detroit. And then Vancouver and Detroit last year were both in the bottom third of the league by 5-on-5 scoring. You cannot maintain an 18-year high shooting percentage. You just cannot do it. The question isn't if that percentage falls, it's how far does it fall, right? And the other thing is what they did with the empty net. Last year, Ovechkin and Protas had 13 empty net goals between them. It was more than like 9 entire teams had them like as their entire roster. Ovechkin had 8 by himself. He had 9 the previous 2 years combined. He had 8 empty net goals in like 62 games or 63 games or whatever.
He's the Joe Thornton of Alex Ovechkins.
Yeah, he more than doubled his rate of empty net goals per game. Clearly, they're trying to get him the goals record, but Protas had 5 himself. They had 13 between them. So if you're wondering why Protas shot like 22%, is because 5 of his goals came with the empty net. I just think there are a lot of red flags for regression. Now, that said, this team is still going to be I think they're going to be a good scoring team, like mid-pack in the league, maybe a little bit better. They're just not going to be at the top of the league again. And this isn't a very good Boston team, especially the depth. So like, it's not that I have a huge problem with Washington because it is a 4-game slate. The second line especially isn't coming in with a ton of ownership. Dubois, McMichael, Wilson, 6.5% ownership. Obviously, that line was pretty good last year. McMichael, Dubois, and Wilson, 4.1 goals per 60 minutes, at 5-on-5. Also 3.2 expected goals. So like they were creating very, very well. I don't mind them if you need like a pseudo filler, especially where they took Jacob Chikrin off the top power play and they added Pierre-Luc Dubois. So now you get 2 out of those 3 guys on the top power play. You get Wilson and Dubois. So I don't mind Washington 2 here. They were good last year. Connor McMichael was, I think, top 10 in the league by individual expected goals at 5-on-5. So it's not like he's just some random third wheel. He's a guy that can actually score. I don't mind Washington 2 here because low ownership, low price. I'm just not super jazzed about the Caps in general. On the Boston side, it's Boston 1 or bust, right? Like David Pastrnak, I looked at it last year. He was involved in more goals, like not just with him on the ice, just more goals of his entire team scored, even when he was off the ice. It was something like 41% of the goals or something like that. It was the highest mark in 5 years. Like he was the offense. And if you look at Elias Lindholm's numbers with David Pastrnak, he produced points at a first-line rate. Now, a low-end first-line rate. Like, he's certainly not even a mid-tier production center, even with Pastrnak, but a low-end first-line rate, like points like you would see from like a Nazem Kadri, right? Not necessarily the same goal rate because Kadri scores more goals, but 60 to 65 points, which is a low-end first-line center. So he's fine. I think Morgan Geekie, he's going to see shooting percentage regression himself, but he's also going to get a full season next to David Pastrnak, which he didn't get last year. It was only basically after like the first 30 games of the season or whatever it was that he got moved up next to Pastrnak full time, 25 games. So a full season next to Pastrnak is going to help soften that blow a little bit. I don't mind Boston 1 here. If you do look at the top stacks, they're not coming in with a lot of ownership. They have very good leverage at 7.1%. Now, they are expensive at $18K. I would probably rather play them than Montreal, just because when it comes down to those kinds of situations, I would take the line with the best player, and David Pasternak's the top 5 player in the world. So I would take Boston 1 over Montreal 1, I think, but Boston 1's also the only line I have interest in. Like, I don't even have interest in their fillers there. Like, honestly, if I wanted to go to a filler stack, I'd go to like that Kirby Doc line for Montreal. We'll talk about Calgary in a second. I think there's some fillers from Calgary you can play. So like, there isn't even some filler stuff I like from Boston here. For me, this is about Boston 1, just because of the correlation, because Lindholm does produce so much more with Pastrnak, because I think Geekie's still going to turn in a 25-goal season if he has a full year next to Pastrnak. because I do think Washington sees some regression. You're right. Like Logan Thompson, other than that 2-month stretch, was just basically what Logan Thompson has always been, which is a good goalie, not a top 3 goalie in the world. So I think Boston 1 is fine. So for me, it's Boston 1, Washington 2 is where my interest lies in this game. Just the Caps spread out the ice time, and I think they're in for some regression. So I really don't have a lot of interest in the guys that are going to get hit hardest by that regression. I think that speaks to especially Ovechkin and Protas.
Yeah, and Hampus Lindholm being in the Boston lineup. That can't even be understated how much the Bruins missed him last season. Not that it would have made a difference.
I mean, just real quick, we love making fun of the Bruins here. Don't get me wrong. But on January 1st, they were in a playoff spot, right? They just completely crashed and burned in the second half. Like once the injuries really started piling up, secondary scoring, early in the season, their bottom 6 was actually scoring pretty well. Like one of the best scoring bottom 6s in the league, especially the 4th line. That just dried up in the second half, and they didn't have a second scoring line after Pasternak. So injuries, no secondary scoring, things completely fell apart. But that first half of the season, they were in a playoff spot. So like, we'll see what they look like with a healthy team. I don't think they're going to look like what they did in February and March last year.
Yeah, I don't know if they're a playoff team, but they'll certainly be in the mix down the stretch.
They're closer to a playoff team than they are, Chicago and San Jose.
Oh, yeah. They just have 3 fourth lines after the first line, which is the second line. But anyway, so let's get on to the next game here. Calgary Flames with a 2.5 total. Heading into Edmonton, the Oilers have a 3.5. Edmonton going McDavid, Draisaitl, Trent Frederic, Nugent Hopkins, Mangiapane, Matt Savoie. Is he French? We don't know.
I think it's Savoie.
Yeah. And then the third line I won't even mention because 2 of the guys aren't even in the player pool. Calgary just pulling names out of a hat. Nazem Kadri, Joel Farabee, Adam Klapka, Coleman, Backlund, Zari, and then Coronado, Frost, Matt V. Gridin. Okay, I will let Cliffy talk about Trent Frederic a little bit more because if you watched our Best Puck streams, he kind of alluded to Trent Frederic is kind of the player that tends to stick with McDavid. I'll let him, if he wants, go into a little bit more detail about that. However, McDavid, Draisaitl, Frederic are only 20K flat, which is just bonkers, right? Draisaitl 8K, McDavid 8,500. Like the two of them at the peak of this season, if they stay together, will be 20K together. Not
exactly. Like McDavid will be 10K and Draisaitl will be like 9,500.
Yeah, not with another player, you know what I mean? And Trent Frederic is 3,500. I think he just full stack here. 39% top 2 stack, highest on the board for us here. 30.2% projected ownership, also the highest on the board. For us here. However, McDavid, Draisaitl X. Wow. McDavid, Draisaitl, anyone else? Kind of rival McKinnon, Netchus, anyone else in terms of just running everyone over. I think Frederic can hang there. He was in the Bruins bottom 6. He was one of the guys who kind of could secondary score. That kind of dried up, which we talked about right before. But I do really like that Edmonton top line. I think where you get into trouble with your builds, right, is if you leave Frederic off, you just slam in McDavid and Draisaitl, and then you click in Matthews and you put in a cheap, chalky line with them. And you're just kind of on a path where it's just like, well, this is really chalky. But that, honestly, like if you're in single entry, it's fine. You can differentiate with your goalie, with your defenseman. I'm just making you aware that if you think you're being sneaky, you're generally not being sneaky. And that's true for me. It's true for Cliffy, true for anyone. That being said, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, Edmonton 1 is my favorite line of the night. Calgary isn't a good team. Like they just missed the playoffs or made the playoffs or just missed, right?
They just missed last year.
Yeah. I don't know like if they can repeat that. Dustin Wolf is a very, very good goalie. This team is not very, very good, though. Justin Huberdeau is out. So like, I do really like Edmonton 1 here. If you live on Narrative Street, Andrew Mangiapane back in Calgary. I don't particularly love that second line. Again, there's not a huge need for a $10,700 line. If you want to leave Frederick off, add Nugent Hopkins for a full power play stack, go for it. That's something that I would consider because Nugent Hopkins always comes in much lower owned than the big boys. But really, it's Edmonton 1, Edmonton power play. And, one of the Edmonton power play guys is not in the player pool. On the Calgary side, like, I remember when Joel Farabee got traded to Calgary from the Flyers, and you're like, just please put him with Kadri. Just please put him with Kadri. And then they put him with Backlund for the whole season. Now, Kadri and Farabee should complement each other very well. I'm not exactly sure what Adam Klapka adds to the mix. He is a player with a first and last name, and he is on that line. I'm not sure what else he will do, though. Now I just locked in a hat trick for him. But if I am, like, the battles of Alberta can get feisty and out of hand. So, like, I don't mind Kadri and Farabee here. I also don't mind Coronado and Frost. But again, like, 2.5 road total going into Edmonton. They have a very, very good penalty kill. Yes, they have issues in net, which we saw come to fruition in the playoffs, but like, this should be a good Edmonton team. I have a bit of reserve about just unloading the Flames here, but if you're 20 maxing, I don't mind getting to some Kadri or Farabee or some Coronado and Frost, but really this is an Edmonton power play game.
So I'll start on the Edmonton side. As you pointed out, and as Willie just pointed out in the chat, 2/3 of the Edmonton third line is not in the player pool. David Tomasek and Isaac Howard. The other thing is, I think Tomasek is on the top power play unit, taking Hyman's spot. So, like, thanks, DK. So you can't use the third line. I don't hate using like a guy off the fourth line on a short 4-game slate like this. I'm not a big fan of it, but if you played like a one-off Pop Colson or something, like, I wouldn't hate it. So it's basically comes down to the top 2 Edmonton lines for me. Now, I'll talk about the Edmonton second line first. Over the last 2 years, when Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has been on the ice with anybody but Connor McDavid, 1.07 points per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. It's like that would be like a bottom 20 mark in the league amongst all forwards. I looked what that would be comparable to. It'd be Joe Veleno. It's Joe Veleno-like production over the last 2 years. Don't forget, that includes some time skating on the second line with Leon Draisaitl. And that includes a fair bit of time when they've moved Hyman off the top line and put him next to Ryan Nugent. Like, it's not like RNH has been playing with these absolute scrubs. He's had time away from McDavid playing with Draisaitl, playing with Zach Hyman, and he's Joe Veleno. I looked at some of the tracking from the website, All Three Zones. His offense created off the cycle last year fell 50%, 50%. Maybe there was some underlying injury that nobody knew about. Maybe there was something going, we've seen players with that have, family issues or whatever off the ice. It affects their on ice product. We don't know what it was. Nugent Hopkins was terrible last year. I don't mean like terrible, should have been playing bottom 6 minutes. I mean, should he have been in the NHL at all? Like, that's how bad he was.
He could have played for the Sharks.
Fair point. He'd be the. I guess I shouldn't say that. They have Nazar. I was going to be the second line center for Chicago. He'd certainly be the second line left winger. He was terrible. So I don't want to play him if he's not on the top line until he shows he's not terrible, because it takes a lot for me to ignore a 33-year-old or whatever he is having an abysmal season. So for me, it's Edmonton 1 or bust. Edmonton 1 is far too cheap. Like we said, McDavid will probably be close to 10K. I think last year he's basically between like 95 and 9,900 for months. Leon Draisaitl was right around 9K. You look at these guys at 8,500 and 8K, they're probably $2,500 cheaper combined than they should be. You had Trent Frederick on the side. Like what I mentioned on the best ball streams is Trent Frederick. The guys that stick next to McDavid, you look at Zach Hyman, you look at Zach Cassian, you look at Alex Chason. These types of guys, they're grinding guys that can forecheck hard, create space down low in the neutral zone or in the offensive zone, and give space for McDavid and Draisaitl to work. Also, Connor McDavid, last 2 years when he had Draisaitl on his wing, 3.64 points per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. That'd be the third best mark in the last 18 years of the NHL. So I don't think I need anybody to tell anybody that McDavid and Draisaitl are great, legitimately, like historically great when they're on the ice together. So I really do like Edmonton one. It's just a matter if you want to pay up to $20K for them or not. I think they're underpriced probably by about $3,500 when you take Frederick's price into account. So I really do like Edmonton one. Not super concerned about the matchup against Calgary. Even if Calgary's fine at 5-on-5, their penalty kill was not good last year. And we know how good the Edmonton power play can be even without Hyman. So, I will say the Edmonton power play did struggle at the start of the season last year with Hyman hurt. We'll see if Thomasek can make a difference. But I really do like Edmonton one. They're not my favorite line on this slate when you factor in the price at $20K, even factoring in the price at $20K, but I don't mind them certainly. On the Calgary side, listen, Klapka over the last 2 years in the AHL, around 3 shots per game. Like, this guy is a shooter, but he's also playing with Nazem Kadri, who is also a shooter. Joel Farabee, he's not exactly a pure playmaker. I do like having Farabee and Kadri together because they're both guys that play off the rush, and I think they can counterattack well. Especially with Edmonton missing Jake Wallman, they're going to have to put in a non-regular NHL defenseman in the lineup to add into the regular NHL defenseman that they have. Ty Emberson, I don't think is a regular NHL defenseman. Darnell Nurse. So these types of guys, I do think that they can take advantage of that. 13,700. I think that's a fair price. For me, it's Coleman, Backlund, and Zari. They were good together last year. They're able to control the play. Coleman and Zari are both good shooters, or at least good volume shooters, decent volume shooters. Zari, he's been one of the few Flames over the last couple of years who's actually been able to finish at an above average rate. At 13,100, you can fit them in with your Bostons and your Montreals and your Torontos and things like that. So for me, it's Coleman, Backlund, and Zari that I would take up. I don't really care about Calgary's power play. I'm sorry. It's just not something that I factor in too heavily.
Edmonton has a good penalty kill too.
Yeah, exactly. And Edmonton, last year, they're at 2.5 times shorthanded per game. It was seventh fewest, I believe, in the NHL. So they didn't give up a ton of power plays either. So for me, it's Coleman, Backlund, Zari. That's the line I feel most confident in that will actually play well. But yeah, Edmonton one is the focus in this game.
Yeah, and I know we need to get to the last game here with 10 minutes to go, but I'm not super concerned. But the power play without Hyman is a little concerned. I just said, I'm not concerned, but I am a little concerned because you still have McDavid, you still have Bouchard, you still have Draisaitl, but Hyman is one of the best net front players in the league. You're probably going to see a lot more point shots now. I don't know how big of a concern that is for you tonight or in long term, but I feel like their power play is going to take a little bit of a hit without Hyman. Let's move on to the last game here. Los Angeles Kings with a 2.5 total heading into Sin City. The Golden Knights have a 3.5. Kings played last night at home. They lost 4-1 to Colorado. They fly out to Vegas. It is a very short flight from LA to Vegas, about an hour. Done it way too many times. Vegas going Eichel, Marner, Barbashev, Dorofeyev, Hurdle, Saad, Stone, Carlson, Riley, Smith. Kings, probably the same lineup as last night. I will say that Laferriere was banged up before last night. Maybe he doesn't play tonight. I'm not running out to play the Kings here tonight, but if you are interested in playing the Kings, is specifically the Byfield Fiala Ferrier line because they look good. I would be a little bit concerned about LaFerriere playing tonight, but it's just me being a worrier there. Like, so yeah, on the King side, that is probably the only line I would want to play. Byfield Fiala Ferrier. They just looked really good last night. They looked good last season. Vegas is a good team. They're a good defensive team. They don't take a ton of penalties. They don't have the best penalty kill, but they took the lowest mark of penalties last season. So really, like, I'm not really running out to play the Kings here, but if I was making 20 to 150, the one Kings line to me would be Byfield Fiala Ferrier. On the Vegas side, now everyone's just going to want to play the shiny new toy, Eichel, Marner, Barbashev, and I think they will be an excellent line. Marner's going to complement Eichel just the way he complemented Matthews. He is an elite winger, no matter what I say. He is an elite player. The issue that I have here is you heard the lines that I said, right? Eichel, Marner, Barbashev, Dorofeyev, Hertl, Saad, Stone, Carlson, Smith. Mitch Marner would play 20, 21, 22 minutes next to Austin Matthews. Now, when this team is fully healthy, Eichel was playing 16, 17 minutes, 17, 18 minutes. You know what I mean? So, like, it would not shock me here to see Eichel, Marner, Barbashev play only 17 and a half minutes here tonight, which is a big drop off from 20, 21, 22. So, 17-7, still cheaper than Boston, still cheaper than Montreal. It's certainly viable. The Kings took 6 penalties last night. They don't have a great penalty kill. You get Marner and Eichel on the top power play unit. They're fine at 12% ownership, but, like, I'd much rather just go play Toronto, either of those lines at that point. For me, and I'm not alone based on the ownership share here, it would be Hertl, Dorofeyev, Saad at 13,700, 8.7% top 2 stack, 19.6% projected ownership. When Brandon Saad got there last year and this line was together, they were excellent. And, I don't see how that changes here. Dorofeyev was hurt during the preseason. So maybe that's a little bit of concern. But at 13.7, I'm willing to find out. You get Hertl and Dorofeyev or just Hertl on the top power play unit, right?
No, they moved Dorofeyev to the top power play in practice yesterday and took Shea Theodore off of it.
Oh, so they're going 5 forwards. Wow.
I mean, that's what they practiced yesterday, but it was like a couple days before that Theodore was on the top power play. Like, I don't think anything's firmly set in stone, but I'm the way I'm playing the slate is as if they're going to have a 5-forward power top.
Yeah, but even with Shea Theodore, when he was practicing, he wasn't at the point. They had Marner at the point.
Right. That's why I think you and I talked about it. I was like, the fact that Shea Theodore is not on the point and that he's on one of the wing spots on the power play, I'm like, it's a matter of time till Dorofeyev moves there.
Yeah. So they're going to give that 5-forward power play a shot, which the Leafs made successful last year, the first team to ever make it successful. So you do get 2 of the 3 guys there, assuming that sticks at 13.7. I do really like them. Anton Forsberg is the Kings backup. The CC experiment is brutal. They'll avoid, the Mikey Anderson pairing. So Vegas Hertl line is my favorite in this game, but, like, if you want to go play that shiny new toy, I think that's fine at the price. I just have minutes concerns.
Yeah, I agree with you about the minutes thing, but I think they still probably get like 19 to 20 as opposed to Eichel playing like 21 last year. Marner's at like 21 and a half. Like, I think 19 to 20 is more reasonable. If they were priced like 19.5 or 20K, I'd be like, well, I don't know. But, like, if they play 19 and a half minutes at 17,700, I think that's pretty reasonable. Now, the thing with Marner is like, he's going to play with Eichel and Barbashev. That just feels like a one step down duo from Matthews Nyes, right? Like, you have the superstar center and then the grinding high shooting percentage winger or whatever. Like, Eichel and Barbashev is pretty much just Matthews and Nyes, but a step below. And, like, that's just going to hurt Marner. Like, that's just, the way it is. Like, whether it makes Marner an 85-point guy or whether, he can maintain 100 points, I guess we're about to find out. But at 17,700, I feel like that's kind of hard to pass up just because it's another one of those things where 2 or 3 really good weeks from this line, they're going to be 19,500, right? So I don't mind Vegas 1 here, especially where I don't know, man. I watched the first half of that Kings Colorado game, and there were stretches where the Kings looked good, but if you look at the goals against, there's one Cody Ceci just straight up pushed the guy in front of his goalie and screened him. It was the Sam Malinsky goal, and then the other one, Ceci and Dumoulin, it was like a 3-ring circus, who's got a who's on first Abbott and Costello routine, trying to figure out who was going to cover who in front of the net, and guess what? They didn't cover anybody, and the puck went in. That they look terrible. So even if that Eichel line only gets 5 shifts against them, I don't like their chances of keeping Vegas off the board. So I do like Eichel, Marner, and Barbashev, and it's 2 things. One, it's the low ownership, only 12% against a 15.6% top 2 stack, and the other is I think they're underpriced by about 10%. That's just basically what it is. Also, Darcy Kemper's not going to be in net, so it's always nice to face a backup. But Vegas 1. They do have 3 playable lines. That you mentioned Brandon Saad and his impact. That line was better after they added Brandon Saad last year. I think Mark Stone, William Karlsson, and Riley Smith, I know they're listed as the 3rd line. That might be the best 3rd line in the NHL. You know what I mean? William Karlsson is on some teams might be a first-line center, certainly a second-line center, and he's lined up as the 3rd-line center here. Mark Stone's on the top power play, so at least you get that exposure. So if you want to do a Karlsson Stone 2-man, I think that's perfectly fine. But I do like Vegas 1 here. On the Kings side, I understand wanting to stay away from LA. They only had 1 goal last night. I will say they did create their fair share of chances. And it's another thing is it's the pricing on Los Angeles 1, right? 15,500 for Kings 1 with ownership under 1%, right? I know it's a back-to-back on the road. It's still a perfectly correlated top line, coming in under 16K and under 1% ownership on a 4-game slate. I think there are a lot of reasons to not necessarily like playing Kings 1, but you don't have to like the lines that you play. I just think if you're looking at a $15,500 line that's perfectly correlated and coming in under 1% when there are only 4 games tonight, you do have to consider them. I didn't think the Morfogel-Danault line looked very good last night. I'm going to be honest. Fiala, Byfield, Lafreniere look fine. I mean, it's only 1 game. You don't want to read too much into it. But for me, I like both top lines in this game, and it's a function of the price. And it's a function of, especially on the Kings side, of under 1% ownership and being perfectly correlated. I would still rather play Vegas. I'd rather play Vegas at 12% than the Kings at 1% in a single entry. But I think if you're playing several lineups, 20 lineups or something like that, I do think you have to consider using the Kings at least once here, just because of a low price, the perfect correlation, and almost no ownership.
Yeah. And with the Vegas ice time, I think after Karlsson came back, it wasn't Eichel that got hurt the worst. It was Hertl and Dorofeyev who saw the reduced in the ice time. So you might be right about that 19, 20-ish minutes. But we will find out. Let's talk about defensemen here. Top of the board, we have Dobson, Weegar, Bouchard, Chychrun, Matheson, Karlsson. Those are the guys 5K and up. The most expensive is Noah Dobson, 6,200. The power play quarterbacks are just too cheap here tonight. Weegar at 6,100, Bouchard 5,800, Karlsson 5,100, Lane Hudson 4,800. Charlie McAvoy, 4,500. Morgan Riley, 4,400. There's just a lot of guys that are underpriced here. I think, depending on who you stack, you could just correlate and go from there. But there are a lot of options here tonight, a little bit different from last night. What do you see?
Yeah. Of the defenseman 5K and above on DraftKings, Bouchard is by far the top projected just for raw points and for points per dollar. He's another one of those guys. He's at 5,800, 2 good weeks and he's 7K. You know what I mean? Even just on a normal day during the season, he'll be between 6,500 and 7,000. So I think Bouchard certainly makes a lot of sense. He's also going to be heavily owned. If you look at the ownership projections, I'll just bring up Edmonton's real quick. They have 4 of the top 8 projected players on the board here tonight. McDavid and Draisaitl both over 30%, Frederick at 26.3, Stuart Skinner at 25, Evan Bouchard at 24. It's going to be a lot of ownership on them. If you do want to avoid the ownership on Bouchard, 25% on a 4-game slate, I really don't care. If you do want to avoid the ownership, I think Weegar makes a lot of sense. Weegar, one of 3 defensemen last year to average at least 2 shots, 2 blocks per game while putting up 40 points. Oddly enough, Jake Wallman was the other. He's hurt tonight, but Wallman, he had a pretty good year last year. But yeah, I don't mind Weegar. For me, he's a pivot. Like if I'm playing 20 lineups, and I see that Evan Bouchard is going to be 25% owned or something like that. Weegar probably around between 5 and 10%. Maybe I have, if I'm playing 20 lineups, maybe I have like 5 Bouchard and 2 Weegar or something like that. You know what I mean? So I certainly don't mind him. Also, shout out Rasmus Anderson. Rasmus Anderson, I know he's not on the top power play or whatever. He was also over 2 shots and 2 blocks per game last year. He is a potential combo meal every time he steps on the ice. I don't mind Rasmus Anderson. Matthias Ekholm makes sense just because he's going to play a lot. I just mentioned in our Discord how you can play Devin Taves with McKinnon because Makar and Taves play so much with McKinnon. Obviously Taves will play with him. It's the same thing with Ekholm and Bouchard, where if you don't want to pay up for Bouchard, I think you can drop down to Ekholm. Morgan Riley, obviously, I think makes a lot of sense running the power play from Toronto and taking off the power play. I think it's a good matchup for him tonight specifically. I don't think Toronto's power play is going to be as good as last year, but top power play, still top power play. Cheap guys. Brant Clark, he led the Kings in 5-on-5 ice time last night. He played 19 minutes, which I think is more than we were expecting, so I like that. Chris Tanev, top 10 by block shots per minute last year for Toronto. He's in. Caden Gooley, top 20 for block shots for Toronto last year. Also interested in him. With Wallman out, you want to play Darnell Nurse or Brett Kulak or something like that, I think that's perfectly fine. If you want a super punt, Rasmus Sandin is one guy from Washington. The other is Zach Whitecloud. When Pietrangelo was hurt last year, it wasn't Shea Theodore that got more minutes. It was Zach Whitecloud that got more minutes. He basically played top pair minutes when Pietrangelo was hurt. Whether that carries over to this year, I guess we're going to find out. But if you need a super punt, I think Zach Whitecloud fits the bill.
Yeah. And Pietrangelo is out for the year. Career, probably. His career is probably over.
Yeah.
Pouring out for the homie. Let's talk about some goalies here. There's only 8 of them, so I'll just go down from most expensive to least. Skinner, Stellaris, Thompson, Hill, Forsberg, Swayman, Montembeault, Wolf. Don't particularly love the expensive options here tonight. If you want to plug your nose and put in Stewie Skinner, I think that's fine. Calgary is one of those teams that creates a lot of quantity, not a lot of quality. Whether Stuart Skinner can stop any of that, we'll find out. After that, I'm really looking. I think the one guy that I like here tonight is Jeremy Swayman at 7,500. You want to go to Montembeault, that's fine. Dustin Wolf, if you want to hedge it's not really hedging the chalk, but he's just going to be super low owned. It's not hedging the chalk because with the DK scoring, Wolf and Edmonton can still get there. So for me, it's Swayman, Skinner. I don't mind Stellaris either. He was excellent last season.
Yeah, Skinner, he's the top point per dollar goalie on the board. And it's the fact that Calgary doesn't score. He's projected for the second most saves and second fewest goals against. Calgary is notoriously a poor shooting percentage team. Skinner faced them twice last year. He only gave up 5 goals in the 2 games. If he can get 25 saves, 2 goals against with the win, I think you kind of take that and runs. The other expensive goalie for me is probably Aiden Hill. The Kings are another team that don't always have a super high shooting percentage. I do worry a little bit about volume. He's not projected for a ton of saves, but he's also not projected for very many goals against. So I think for me, the expensive goalies, it's Skinner and Hill. For the cheap goalies, Need I remind everybody that the first game of the season last year was Montreal against Toronto, and Sam Montembeault had a 48 save shutout. Now, obviously, nobody's predicting a 48 save shutout, but
EVP, baby.
I think Montembeault is probably the most underrated goalie in the NHL, and I'm saying that as an analyst. I'm not saying that as a fan.
I would agree with you.
Yeah, and they lost Marner, who is one of the best playmakers in the league. So if I could definitely see a world where Montembeault saves 31 out of 32 shots and Montreal wins the game 3-1 or something like that. So if I'm looking for one of the cheap goalies, it's probably Montembeault. But if you had the salary, it's Skinner or Hill.
Yeah. We will be back tomorrow for the 316 game slate. Montembeault is the only goalie who finished with a higher goal saved above expected than Igor last season. He is a top 10 goalie, whether the old hockey dudes want to admit it or not. But 14 game slate tomorrow. Those are tough to break down, but you guys will be with us. That makes it easier. We'll see you guys tomorrow. But before we leave, who are you liking for your hat trick pick?
I am doing the old heads reverse double jinx and saying Matthew Nyes. Just the absolute coward pick.
That is so cowardly. Got all your bases covered there. I'm going to go. Man, this slate sucks. I'm going to go. I have to do it. He's my guy. He's your guy, Pavel Dorofeyev.
Yeah, I like it. It's a good spot for him.
We'll see you tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. It will probably run longer than an hour. It's almost impossible to get 14 games done in an hour. But that's why we moved it to 1:30. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, all your support. Good luck, everybody, tonight. And hopefully we're leading off the show like we're today, talking about how you won.
Good luck tonight, everyone.